Hello and welcome to Setting the Stage, Episode 7, Unaz and Zierna. Unaz, why don't you start off by telling me a little bit about who you are outside of D&D?
All right, I'm Unaz. I am a engineering student outside of D&D. Most of the time, I spend this with my studies, like projects and stuff. Other than that, I used to be a athlete back in the day.
What sport?
I used to play basketball for a while and then volleyball a little bit.
Mhm.
Yeah, and like that's what comes on top of my head, actually. And I used to teach. Okay, I forgot that. I used to be a teacher like a couple of years ago. I quit that job so I can pursue my education better.
Mhm. What type of engineering are you doing?
Uh, Chemical engineering currently.
Okay. And where are you located?
I live in Istanbul, Turkey,
Gotcha.
approximately the other side of the planet for you guys, I believe.
Pretty close. I think the actual opposite is Sri Lanka for me. Yeah, still pretty
Yeah,
far.
yeah.
What got you into Dungeons and Dragons?
Well, it was, I believe, in middle school when I first came across. There was an MMORPG for Dungeons and Dragons. I don't exactly remember its name. I went into that, and I that was when I first heard about Dungeons and Dragons. Then I also was really into fantasy books back in the day, like reading one each day kind of stuff.
Wow, yeah,
And
that's a lot.
in the local library, there was a new book, the Turkish translation for the Dragonlance books, to be specific. I bought those, I read those, and at the end of one of those books, it said this book's based off of the tabletop RPG Dungeons and Dragons. And I started doing research on that, and I forgot about it for a while until like at the end of high school when one of my friends said, "Hey, there's a thing called Dungeons and Dragons. You want to play?" And that's how I got into that.
Cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think I got into the books the other way around by playing the game and then wanting to read them, but
yeah,
that's neat that it works the other way
yeah,
around
yeah.
too. I remember that MMO too. I think it was called just D&D Online.
Yeah, it might be. I remember that. I don't remember its name. It might be D&D Online. And there's Neverwinter Online that I actually played a lot, which
Yeah,
sparked my interest in D&D all over again.
I never played Neverwinter Online, but yeah, it's cool. They're like all of the D&D video games I've really liked when I played them. Have you tried the Pathfinder ones?
No, unfortunately. I think I have one of those Pathfinder games. I don't know its exact name on top of my head. I didn't have the chance to play it yet, though.
It's quite good. I just finished it about a month ago. So
Yeah, it is on my agenda if I find the time to play video games.
yes, there's a long list of ones that I haven't played yet, and I was trying to work through it, so I managed to find the time for that one. Um, how did you start DMing?
Well, it was actually again in high school when my friend asked, like, if you want to play D&D. We started doing research and we found out, hey, we need a DM to do that, these kind of things. And I just jumped, hey, I'll do that because I don't know why. I started doing the research. I started reading the books. The first book I read was the DM's Guide for Fifth Edition, to be specific. And then I just started DMing, and it was like a game once a week at school during lunch break, like an hour
Mhm.
session each. Then, yeah, I've been DMing ever since. Like it's been, what, 6 years, I believe.
Cool. So you hadn't really played before you were DMing? Like you
Yeah,
started DMing before you were did anything as a player?
yeah, yeah. The first experience I had at D&D was DMing.
Okay. That's fairly unusual now. Usually people get into it through um being a player and someone else's DMing.
Yeah, yeah. But we had nobody that actually knew how to play Dungeons and Dragons around us, so one of us had to do that, and I took up the mantle.
Okay. Do you want to start talking about your campaign world? Like, what's the name and a physical description of the world?
Well, the world is called Zierna, Zierna. It's mostly a mostly consists of three major continents and a couple islands and island groups. The game, the games I ran, I'm currently running my second campaign in this setting. Usually take place in the uh, northwestern continent. That's the most developed one at the moment. Other than that, my players actually did visit the other ones occasionally.
So there's multiple continents, but they're mostly on one. What's that one continent like?
The continent is called Alain, Alein, and it's actually divided into two through like a series of mountains. The eastern side is the mostly inhabited one. It's, you know, on the north is more cold and North Pole-ish place, and as you go south, it becomes more grasslands and forest lands, more like Middle European kind of geography there.
Hmm.
But the western side after the mountains is currently at least a wasteland that my players did have the chance to go through on occasion.
So would you say it's more like Europe or more like Northern Asia?
The eastern side is more like Europe, I would say, more greener, like forests, birch and pine mostly. And the western side is actually a little inspired from Middle East, all the deserts and kind of wasteland-ish parts. Well,
Okay,
there's still life on the western side, but it's really scarce and here and there, let's say.
gotcha. What's the culture like for the different places there? Is it all like unified or is it different based on the different places?
It actually differs from place to place. Like there are a couple, I wouldn't call countries, more like city-states in the western side. One of the city-states where my players are currently in, Calterine, it's the most mixed in terms of population. You can find any kind of people in that city, like not elves, half elves, half folk, dwarves, halflings, humans, etc. Well, more exotic races you can still find there, but they're a sight to see, let's say. Like you can see a minotaur every day, but there are. The other cities, like the smaller towns, are more human and dwarf based and half elves.
Okay.
There is there's this stereotypical mountain kingdom, like under the mountain, which is mostly dwarves. I think other than that, the eastern side is relatively mixed. Like if you're from any race, you can find a place somewhere. It wouldn't really be problematic. The other side, however, is like a little bit of a problem because first off, you have to be adaptable to survive in that environment.
The desert.
Yeah, in the desert, there's all kinds of, you know, there are the ruins of an old civilization with monsters. There's the earth elemental problem over there, and there are the warring tribes. So I would say I don't actually have it like written on paper what percentage of the population is. I would say more hardier races fit to travel, not spending the night in the same place twice.
Okay, so it's like
More,
nomad
yes, more
tribes.
nomadic.
It's interesting you mentioned dwarves being a major population besides humans. I don't think that's that common
Yeah.
in the campaign worlds.
Well, currently there is a reason for that. In my current campaign, at least one of the bigger plot points is that there was some kind of an event 30-ish years ago where, you know, elementals kind of attacked, to put it simply. And currently, the 75% of the world is inhabitable. And the reason why dwarves are in like a big majority here is because at before that event, most of the dwarves were already here. So while humans and elves and the other races lost their homes and most of their population, dwarves had nothing. They're just saying they're chilling. That's why they were, even though they were a minority, they are now a majority.
Gotcha. They were the unaffected portion.
Yeah, they didn't get affected by the events, let's say.
What was the event you were talking about there?
Well, it's let me pull up the timeline. I'm an old-fashioned guy. Always take my notes in papers instead of, even though I have a PC and work with a computer all the time because, engineering, I still have my papers all over the place.
I did that when I started. I had like a big accordion folder that I kept all my notes in, so I like had different sections for different things.
Yes, that's what I have currently. Because when I'm writing on PC, I just don't feel like I'm writing anything. The paper and pen feels more involved somehow.
Well, I also liked it because then when I actually go to a session, I could bring everything with me in that. So if someone asked me a question, I could like look up an answer if one existed.
Yeah, yeah. Or just make something up if it doesn't exist.
Yeah, yeah, and then I had a note paper section in the book, so I could just pull out a piece of paper and write something down and then put it file it away in the right place.
Yeah, yeah. Well, approximately 30 to 40 years before the current campaign takes place, there was a group of individuals, let's say that call themselves the elemental archons. They used like artifacts from the old times and channeled the power of the elemental planes. I do have the elemental planes in my setting to cause like let's say trouble. They claimed some parts of the world for themselves, like for some parts they were fully conquered, like the continent on the south is completely under the control of the fire archon. Wouldn't say completely, 97%. There's like a 3% little spot that she doesn't have.
Uh,
While on the other hand, in the northern continent, Earth, Archon managed to take like 60% of it at most. He got blocked by the mountain pass for some reason. Like there is a reason for it, but I cannot say that.
Gotcha. And is the northern one the one you're talking about,
Yes, Alain.
Elaine?
Yes, correct. Uh, there's the third continent on the west, Le Lenas, that got taken over by the Air Archon. Actually, my players were there before the full takeover. There was a small city there that my players started at, and the plot point of that arc was the Air Archon trying to take over the city, and you know he did manage to take over. So my players had to evacuate that city. Now that now they're in Alain.
That's pretty cool. And I like that kind of world building where you bring in a villain like that and the players have to run.
Yeah, uh they had to like run, get some help. One of my players had to take his parents out. That was a whole another session. I had to run a private session, one-on-one session with my player for that.
That's really cool.
And the Water Archon just has the oceans because that's the most simple answer.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, like by land, she has the least because there's like a group of islands between the western and southern continents that used to be connected at some point, like a shattered piece of land. She has there, like that, it's really small compared to other ones, but she also has the oceans. So technically, she has the most land.
So you mentioned the four elements, so you and the four planes. Can you tell me a little bit more about the rest of the cosmology for your campaign?
Oh. Cosmologies. Well, there's the material plane in the middle. Then there's the Feywild and Shadowfell, just directly next to it. It's really similar to Forgotten Realms, actually. Then there's the four element. four main elemental planes around that, and the side planes between those, like the plane of ash, the plane of ice,
Mm.
and so on and so forth. Then starts the outer planes, like Mount Celestia, Nine Hells, Limbo, and Mechanus, and so on and so forth. Like I do have a map of those somewhere, but I haven't used the outer planes that much this campaign because it's mostly been focused on my players trying to uh, create a mafia organization. So I haven't been involved with outer planes that much. Like a little bit
Okay.
elemental planes, but that's it.
What about the gods?
Oh, I do have a unique system of gods for my own campaign. There's the hierarchy of Xiernian divinity. Like they're the prime divinity, the higher end of gods, then they're greater deities, like not as powerful but widely worshipped, and lesser than it goes down to pseudo deities. And then there are like beings of deific power that are not gods, like higher ancient beings, let's say, without giving that much spoilers.
Okay.
The divinity actually is split into three parts. There's the like stereotypically good gods, bad gods, and the neutral ones. That I call them the virtuous, the sinners, and the keepers, more like, because the virtues and the sinners are based on seven deadly sins and seven virtues. When I first started, I just made the system like there's seven good gods, there's seven bad gods, and each of them has a counterpart. Like the most basic one is Bahamut and Tiamat. They're just each other's counterparts.
Right.
And then there's the three, I call them the three sisters or the three keepers that are responsible of the cycle of life, like birth, life, and death.
Mhm.
And then there's the lesser, I wouldn't say lesser, the greater deities that are just below the prime divinity. Like one example would be the Lady of Luck, like the goddess of luck. Then there's the god of thieves and mischief, and so on and so forth.
Okay. That seems like there's a lot of choice there, but it still has like some like defined roles so that
Yes.
like you can have sort of a campaign mythology that builds off of those like touch pieces like
Yes.
the diametric gods or the Trimurti that you talked about.
Yes, yes. Well, my previous campaign was a little bit based on divinity, like the divines and their bestowed gifts upon the humanity, let's say. My previous group tried to collect all of them, or at least find them and find a place to store them so unruly hands wouldn't reach, because they're a little over the top items, let's say. A race against time to find artifacts and store them before other people found it.
That's cool. So what was the other group or groups that were trying to find the items in that case?
Well, there was of course, the group that uh, the, the party that tried to find it. There was a smaller other adventurer group. Like the party was five people. The other adventurer group I'm talking about was three people. They were higher level. They were like experienced old adventurers that were trying to, hey, things are not going back. Don't, things are not doing good. So we gotta step up again. Come back from retirement. There was the aspiring archmage of a distant uh, kingdom that was trying to find those artifacts to, use for their own ends. There was the big bad evil guy, of course, trying to use it for his own rituals and stuff. And there were like uh, non-affiliated persons that were also because it's power and prestige to have one of those.
So this kind of reminded me of the plot of Sonic, where there's all these different people that are trying to get the Chaos Emeralds.
Well, yeah, you can kind of say that.
What did the different items do, or did they all have some sort of unified like power that tied them together, or were they all just sort of like
But
different gods had given different items something?
uh, they they weren't set in stone items. They were more like concepts. Each god had a like how to say an approximate idea of what their item would be. I call them anchors, divine anchors. Each god had an approximate idea what their anchor would be. Like for example, Bahamut's item would be based on protection and selflessness and standing in the face of danger. So with each holder, the item changed its appearance and function. For example, one of the forms of Bahamut's item was a sword. One of the forms was a shield. One of the forms was a helmet. But they all had like similar-ish abilities, taking damage from others and standing in the front of the battle to, take the brunt of it. Uh, the thing that they all had in common was being able to evolve. When you first got the artifact, it would be like in a sleeping state, I would say dormant. Then through your actions and deeds, you would improve the item until it came to its final state, where it would be actually depending on what kind of a character you are, you would be a walking single man army.
So would they just attune with anyone? Like I feel like
Well, the
Bahamut's
yeah
shield or anchor wouldn't
yeah
attune with
an
like
evil
a
person. Yeah,
lich or something.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, an evil person.
Well, of course, they had like limitations. For example, again, Bahamut's required you to be lawful neutral at worst or lawful good.
Mhm.
Like approximation, I don't use alignments in my campaign, but you have to have good intentions, let's say.
Yeah.
On the other hand, the divine anchor of Lolth, the Spider Queen, is, you have to be a little a deviant to be able to utilize that item. So
Right.
those items were looking for personality traits and intentions, more like. And like some of them also had class requirements. The Goddess of Magic required you to be a wizard, for example.
All right. Yeah, of course, that makes sense. So how did your players end up using them?
Uh, well, the first time they stumbled upon one of them. A henchman of the big bad evil guy was trying to, experiment with one of those items, like trying to extract the essence and power from it, using it like a battery. The paladin found the shield actually, which would be fitting, like a paladin. At the beginning of the campaign, the paladin was like a stereotypical dad, lawful good, strict rules. Don't put your hands out of the window while the car is driving, etc.
Uh-huh.
Then he became a little less lawful, still good, like because the party is a really bad influence. Uh, that's the shield was, reacted to his selflessness because he was always in the front, taking the hits for everybody. Then there was the dagger. That was a dagger, right? If I remember correctly. The moon goddess's dagger. It was based on like mobility and elusiveness because under the moonlight you move faster for some reason, I guess. Like the uh, cloak of the night would be a better term there. It was based on mobility and being fast and being precise. The fighter managed to get his hands on that. So, and he already had the mobile feat and, you know, boots of mobility. So, yeah, good luck catching that man on the battlefield.
Oh.
Yeah, it was actually, at some point, it became a pain in my ass trying to catch him. I had to give like Sentinel to some of the monsters to be able to keep him in his place.
That's pretty cool.
And well, of course, all of them had like a small storyline associated with them, all the items.
Yeah, yeah, they did seem like type of item that would have that.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Like most of them had like a small quest type to the end of them, which actually one of them is still continuing to this day, like the second campaign. One of the old characters is still alive, technically. My players do know that he is alive because, level 20 druids, they don't die.
they're level 22?
They were at that point.
Ah, okay.
My old campaign took 2 years to complete.
Mhm.
So I started them at level 3, if I remember correctly. Not all of them. Some of them started at 2. I did like a session 0 for some of them.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and they did get up to level 17. Some of them managed to get to 20 because like scheduling issues and whatnot, we have to divide the party at some point.
Okay, yeah.
So the storylines that I wrote for campaign 1 are still continuing in campaign 2, even though it has been 70 to 80 years since, between campaigns.
Right. It's the same group of players though for the two campaigns?
Yes,
Oh, that's great.
yeah, it's the same. The Druids player is currently playing, and he's trying to not metagame, but I know that he wants to go to where his Druid did his quest because the Druid's quest was to plant the world tree as second one because the goddess of nature foresaw that a second one would be necessary, and she was right. So
Hmm.
the player really wants to go and see that tree because the druid should be around still, but he's trying to not metagame about it because his character would have no idea what's happening.
So earlier you mentioned the archon showing up, and it sounds
Yes.
like that happened in between the first and the second campaign.
Yes, it
The
did.
first one was 80 years ago, and the archons was like
20,
30 or 40 years ago.
20-ish, let's say 25.
Okay. Um, so what happened in the meantime that allowed the archons to show up and start taking over the world?
Well, uh, approximately 30-ish years ago, there was like a power vacuum because the previous
Excuse me.
campaigns, characters were all either missing or dead because some of them were, you know, it would be their characters' natural lifespan ending around that time. So characters are gone or like preoccupied. In the example of the druid, he's busy. Uh, the couple of other stronger NPCs that I had did go missing at some point because of one reason or another that I can't reveal it. So there was a power vacuum, and these archons were already planning this kind of stuff like 50 to 60 years ago. They were because these things take time and preparation. So they were slowly gathering followers, slowly gathering their artifacts. And at the beginning, their cause was, hey, humanity is destroying the nature because all those like wars and events and previous apocalypses that happens is damaging the nature in a great way. So their first argument was, hey, humanity is destroying nature, we gotta protect it. And they started to devolve into a cult at some point, and like 25-ish years ago, they just pulled the trigger.
So the eco-terrorists, basically.
Yes, they started as eco-activists, then became eco-terrorists, and currently they're just terrorists. Yeah, because what they're doing is far more harmful to nature than anything ever happened. Because the continent I mentioned in the east that housed the older world tree is currently completely on fire, which isn't really good for nature, I would assume.
Yeah, probably not.
Probably not. Speaking as a, environmental science person, that I did work with environmental science, it's not really good when one of your continents is completely on fire.
No, no, that does not sound very good. I had a character in one of my campaigns that had a similar, like wanting to save the environment, but also like going about it the wrong way, where he was devoted to the natural world and dragons were part of that. So he wanted to just do whatever dragons wanted to do, but they were like really destructive and evil. So he ended up sort of damaging the world because he was supporting the dragons.
Oh yeah, misguided zealotry. I've been noticing like lately because I've been reviewing my notes for this interview, looking at stuff that I missed or not. I'm not like uh I'm a history nerd. Like, I'm a fantasy nerd. I like lore. I like writing lore.
Hmm.
That's why like the amount of lore I have for the background of the world, like history. I do have currently in my hand the timeline starting from 14,000 before, you know, the zero, and it goes up to current dates, which is 952. I have the timeline, the events, the important people that were there. So like it's mostly history based, really, my setting, like stuff that happens. It had impacts on the world and it's currently still being felt, and the players are struggling with those most of the time.
It's pretty neat. I love timelines like that. I mean, I have my own for my campaign, so it's always nice to be able to reference a historical event and like actually have it written down that it happened instead of having to like
Yes. Because
fabricate
yeah,
it.
because also my players are a little picky about that. When I talk about historical events, they got used to me giving exact dates and exactly what happened. And now if I don't do that, they become suspicious. Like, what is he planning? Is he gonna murder us? I can't even take notes during the sessions because uh, or I can't even doodle on my papers. Like while they're doing role play, I'm listening, but my hands need to be busy with something because like I have ADHD. So while I'm doodling on the paper, absentmindedly, they start going like bonkers, saying he's taking notes, something is gonna happen. Uh, what did we miss? I'm just I'm just a mentally ill man. Please be easy on me.
When I was learning to play, what the DM did sometimes was he would ask us, "Oh, what's your perception?" And then he would roll behind the DM screen and then just say, "Hmm, interesting."
Well, I do that too. Like the thing I did with one of my players who's still playing with me was, hey, what's the maximum HP of your animal companion? Just for no reason. Yeah, I like being evil too sometimes, so their worries are not completely unwarranted.
Now that I've switched to playing virtually, it's a bit harder to do that kind of joking with your players, but it's definitely fun.
We always had to play virtually because we started during COVID, and my players are all over the world. Let's say one of them is in Europe, I'm in Turkey, in Istanbul. Two of them are in another city. One of them was in Russia at some point. Yeah, so we always had to play virtually. We use Roll20 for that and
Uh-huh.
Discord. But we, uh, as much as we can, turn on our webcams so we can see each other's
Mhm.
face because that really helps with roleplay, like mimicking and
Oh, definitely.
uh,
Yeah.
the state of your face, like when you're reacting, blah blah blah. So also that.
No, I want to do that for my group too, but it's got too much bandwidth issues for some of the people in the group.
Yeah, understandable.
We have to do without the video. So for the archons, you mentioned that there'd been all these people that had evacuated from where they were living because of
Yes,
the fire and the floods and
yes,
all that.
correct.
What's that like in the places they're going where there's all these like new refugees that are showing up?
Yeah. Well, uh, in the current continent, like Ale, and I'll continue from that. Uh, the population was approximately like it wasn't that crowded. There were empty spaces before evacuation. Currently, for example, this city-state of Caltarian, it has like giant 10-meter tall walls around the city for security reasons. And the entire population was able to fit into the walls, but now there's like a mile-long extended settlement around the walls for the refugees. One of the smaller towns had to be upgraded into a actual large city to be able to house people. And uh,
Wow.
through like public funding, they created a refugee settlement, which is currently around like large city, small metropolis, because like more than half of the current world's population has to live here because the rest of the world is uninhabitable at the moment. So our population is currently being a problem. Our population, like a shortage of food and resources. People within the city don't notice that because, they have been living comfortably and they are continuing to living comfortably. But people outside in the refugee camps and the temporary settlements that turned into a large city, they are having problems. And still there are people coming in because the city in the side continent fell really recently. People are still evacuating that city.
Definitely sounds like unsustainable for the number of people.
Yeah, it is.
So are you bringing that as like a challenge for the players to solve, or is it just
Yes. Well,
uh,
actually, they're facing a similar-ish problem. One of my players' backstory is that he was sold off as a slave with his entire tribe. So they're tr currently trying to find a place for the tribe to live, like comfortably live, flourish, not worry about resources and food and stuff. That's
uh
one of the challenges they're currently facing.
um, yeah, why don't so you mentioned Calterrain a few times. Do you want to describe that city a bit
All
more
right.
detail?
Uh, it's it's actually a city-state, a kingdom founded in the year zero. Actually, the current calendar starts with the founding of Calterine. It's a like big walled off circular-ish city divided into 5 parts.
And you said it's year 952
Yes,
now, is that
it's
right?
currently
Okay,
952. So
so about 1,000 years.
yeah, it's about 1,000 years old city. Well, it got renovations done multiple times. It got, you know,
Oh, yeah,
it's
of
at
course.
some point it got burnt down completely. At some point it got destroyed multiple times. So even though like the ancient parts, for example, there's a giant underground complex below the main castle. That's a couple thousand years old, even before the kingdom was founded. But the walls and the city is no older than 100. It got destroyed and rebuilt multiple times during its history. It it's divided into like 5 parts. 4 of those parts is equal. The fifth part is the largest, where most of the population is, like the trade hub and the population center of the city. The city is being governed by it's well, people say that it's governed by the king, but it's mostly the royal council of nobles, let's say, that have the control. What they say is the law currently. The king is more of a puppet, unfortunately.
Oh, sorry, the king is what?
Puppet, like being controlled by the rich, powerful council members.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, yeah. There was a proper king at like before. Actually, the king of Keltarine was one of the members of that strong adventurer party that I mentioned in my previous campaign.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
The king, the king's brother, the twin brother, actually, they were part of that adventuring party. Well, they disappeared, and the king didn't have heir, like no son or daughter to speak of. So they had to go back on the family tree and find one of the side families that branched off of the royal family to take over. And they haven't been doing a good job, let's say, for the past 50-ish years.
Yeah, that's neat. Um, I've been doing little nods to that in my campaign that I'm doing now to previous ones that I've had.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
definitely nice to be able to do that.
yeah. Like, and but not all the council members are evils. Most of them are, because they're mostly money motivated, and because now there's like a resource shortage because of all those people. They don't
Right.
they don't really want to give up on their comfort to, accommodate all these people. Not all of them, of course. Like there are a couple good people there that are trying to take the wheel and direct the population to a better state. But they're the minority, unfortunately.
Right.
And my players managed to like spot that good individual in the council and are currently working for them, trying to make good, like uh, untangle the conspiracies, let's say, set by other members.
Who decides who's a member on the council? Is it the king or someone else?
Uh, at first, the hero king that I mentioned before, uh, deci- when he was forming the council, because he was outside really often, like running to one side of the world to, stop a war, save people, be an adventurer. Because even though he has obligations as a king, the soul of an adventurer, you have to go and see new places. So he did
Oh, of
form,
course.
yeah. So he was being a little irresponsible, let's say. So he did form the royal council and placed like people that he trusts that would run the country proper on the council. But slowly over time, after he was gone, one of the members got off, a rich and powerful person got in. One of them got off, a rich, powerful person got in. And for the last 10 years, it has been uh, more like a aristocracy rather than a council, like powerful noble families. One member is on the council when they get off, another member from the same family gets in. So
Ah, okay.
there's one member left from the original council. I wouldn't say one member. There was a member of the original council that got off, and his younger sister got to the council, and she is still there. Like she got in when she was 30. She's now pushing 90. She's still rocking there.
Oh, did she get in one year during the first campaign, or was that not quite line up?
Uh, she was there in the first campaign. Like my players did actually meet her in the first campaign. She was in her early 20s around that time. After the first campaign ended, the Royal Council was founded. It was after the campaign ended. Uh, Her brother was in the council. He left. She got in. She's still in the council, and she's actually one of those people who are trying to, steer it in the right direction. But she's gotten old. Like you have, she's trying, but she's just a human. 90 is already too much for a human,
I'll find out what that's like eventually.
hopefully.
So you mentioned that your players are trying to set up some sort of mafia organization now.
Yeah.
Is that a goal that you gave them, or did they just decide that on their own? How'd that work?
Well, it started funny. In the previous city, the city is called Palteapolis, by the way, on the other continent. There isn't much left of the city because it got ravaged by the air elementals, specifically an Elder Tempest, like the big CR-21.
Hmm.
Uh, while they were there, they were going through like the not so safe part of the city. They were going through the main road, but the main road was blocked. I intentionally did that, so they would choose the back streets. They got hit by bandits. instead of, disposing of the bandits and moving on, they just tied them up, convinced them to join them, and they sort of formed a semi-criminal organization there. They started taking like local jobs, helping people like running security and doing odd jobs and so on and so forth. And now they're trying to create a branch in Keltarine, paying the correct people to present them, trying to get into politics. That was not my intention at the beginning of the campaign, honestly. Like, I was planning on running more espionage and more high fantasy and adventure and like big stakes. And at, I believe it was in second session or third, they went, "Hey, let's become the Yakuza of the city." And they have been running the Yakuza of the city ever since.
Cool. Are they having fun with it?
Yeah, absolutely. They're having so much fun. That's why I haven't stopped them. Like, this wasn't my intention. I had no plans about it. I had to make it on the spot on that session, and I have been doing research like how does mafia work? So I can, I actually had to do some research. Like,
What a great Google search
yes,
history.
I will. If like government officials were to look at my search history, I would be arrested on the spot. Uh,
Yeah, I feel
I,
like there's a lot of stuff like that for D&D.
yes, with no context, it just looks wrong. So I had to research like mafia and like government. How does it work? Like how does paying for stuff you want to be happen work? I forgot the term in English. My apologies. Bribe, yes, that's it. How does
Okay,
bribing
yes.
work? And yeah, I've been running a side mafia campaign during my overall campaign. It has been fun for me. Surprisingly, I didn't think I would like it because I don't really like that mafia yakuza aesthetic personally. But it has been fun. They're having so much fun though. That was my initial inspiration point. They're having so much fun. I gotta try, giving them a little more material to work with. And now here we are. They're creating a side branch in another continent for their mafia business. And like their planning is they do their like plans hidden from me. I've heard from one of my players that they have been compiling a document on what to do to create this side business, like legal mumbo jumbo, like applying to the government for business, finding a place for headquarters, researching about the socio-economical state of the city and whatnot. They have like a 2 to 3 page document on that. I'm just
Oh,
wait.
that's great.
Uh, we're gonna have our next session next Saturday. We had to cancel this week because some of my players had exams. Uh,
Mhm.
I am excitedly waiting what they're gonna come up with.
Oh, that sounds really neat.
Yes, I learned how mafia works.
It's all sorts of weird stuff you learn just because you wanna run that kind of thing.
Yes.
One of the weirdest ones I learned was like about how different worms work because I wanted to have like a worm creature, but like one that was based off of actual predatory worms.
Oh, that's interesting.
I looked up like a bunch of different of like earthworms and other ones and found some that like you know how worms like you can cut them in half and they kind of still both survive.
Yeah, yeah,
So that was the mechanic it had is like when it died it actually just split in half and then you had to fight two of them.
yeah. Uh, that part of D&D is actually what I have fun with, like the real world knowledge being applied to D&D. One example would be the spell heat metal. My players love that because boiling a person alive is fun for players, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Why not?
they always find like a hyper-specific application of the spell. Like, what if I heat meddled this specific thing on the person? What would happen? And I'm a chemical engineer. I can just stop there and calculate what happens. Like the heat transmission, when the metal is gonna melt, and how much of the heat is gonna be felt through that armor. I did like I don't exactly remember what my one of the smaller campaigns that I ran. One player tried to do heat metal on the golden tooth of a person. I had to stop and do calculations to understand what would happen if a person's teeth uh, fell off, like melted off in their mouth.
Just their teeth.
Yeah, it's just golden teeth being melted. Yeah, horrifying.
Ah, man. I don't even know how you would look that up.
No, I didn't look that up. I just looked the specific heat points of gold and did that is went from there.
Okay. Guess your engineering background is coming in handy.
Yeah, yes. You wouldn't expect to calculate what would happen when a person's gold teeth melts off, but here we are.
Well, yeah, I didn't know you needed to know that, but now I know that I should learn that in case my players do it.
Yeah. Uh, Whatever you prepare in D&D, your players always will throw a curveball at you. Like they will always do the unexpected.
Is there anything else that you want to talk about for your campaign world?
Oh boy, there's a lot of stuff to talk about, but I'm trying to pinpoint more like isolated and interesting points. I can and trying to find something that wouldn't spoil because my players will be listening to this.
Yes, yes, that is
Well, actually, I can talk about like the history, like the major history, like timeline thingy, like and
yeah.
how the world evolved into the current state. Well, it starts around question mark before Cataclysm. The year zero is called the Cataclysm, even though it's not the only one. Uh, the year question mark is, the creation myth of the world, when it's created, when the first people got in, and the gods and whatnot.
Hmm.
There was a primary, the first calamity that destroyed the first civilization. The stereotypical, the first people that are extremely advanced in technology and magic and spirituality, they went down. They did last a lot, though, like a couple thousand years at least, but uh, an outside force, let's say, and I'll leave it at that, uh, forced them to, self-destruct at some point. And then the history starts moving on, and other civilizations are founded. Uh, the name of the world is given actually at the second uh, event, Zierna. There was a civilization of highly technologically and magically advanced people called the Zierat. Society, kingdom, magocracy, I would say.
Hmm.
The inspiration I
Okay.
got for these people are the Netherese from Forgotten Realms and the other ancient technologically advanced civilizations from other works of uh, fiction and fantasy. These are the people they like my players know the most because in the previous campaign they were a plot point. The ruins that they left are still around. Actually, one of the ruins is marked on my map that I'm going to send to you when I find it. Uh, this civilization was, the floating cities, the high arcana, the archmages, and it's actually a classic story of humanity destroying itself in its hubris. Going above the limits and what you should do, and not asking if you can, and not asking if you should. and actually leaving permanent scars on the world, destroying like a couple fundamental forces of the universe. For example, in my setting before this event, there was a divine veil, let's say, that interfered between the mortals and the divine during the fall of this empire because the event was so large. They tried to create some sort of artificial divine entity through arcane means. And uh, upon this creation, like the creation is smart, it's a small god. It knew that it was being experimented on, it was being used, so it tried to break free. And during those events, they accidentally shattered the divine veil, which started the Age of Gods, where the gods were able to come down and just chill with the mortals, which slowly evolved into gods realizing that they don't really like each other that much. Before they were
Uh,
interacting, before the veil was broken, they weren't interacting with each other that much because, like, yeah, you're over there, I'm over here, let's don't interact. But when they got down to the mortal realm, they started to realize you're you're all bad people, you're all assholes. You don't really like you. Could you go away, please? Which started the divide between the gods, which is when the seven gods separated the virtuous and the sinners. Is when around this time, and they started, of course, bickering and gathering followers, which are really reminiscent of cults, even though they're gods. They started
well,
picking
yeah.
sides, they started working against each other, and because they're gods doing this on the mortal realm, it doesn't really do good for the mortals, which caused the other apocalypse, the year zero, let's say. Uh, at that point, they realized that their existence cannot be sustained on this planet, and they rebuilt the veil, sealed themselves away, and left the mortals to do their own thing. And they have been doing their own thing since, like approximately for 1,000 years. With some good, with some bad, like, bringing the elemental apocalypse is a thing, scaring off the dragons so there are no dragons anymore is a thing, whatnot. Yeah. It doesn't matter if there are gods or not, humanity will find a way to F shit up, to put it lightly. That's actually like the overall theme of my setting. Humans will find some way to make things bad. There will be consequences for the future. Uh,
Yeah, I like themes like that, like more of a like moral lesson that
yeah,
it doesn't have to be like a campaign setting. It could be just for a campaign or in an adventure scenario that you come up with.
yeah.
That's cool.
The mistakes of the past coming to haunt you in the future, coming to haunt other people in the future, more specifically. Then you fix the mistakes of the past and you make your own. So it haunts the people of your future. It's like an endless cycle of fixing and breaking.
Well, cool. Um, is there anything else you wanted to talk about for your not your campaign world necessarily, but your like the campaign plot you have going on with your players?
Oh, the current plot, yes, I can say a couple things. Well, the first and foremost thing they're dealing with is the elemental archons. Because two of my currently I only have three players, like a small party. Two of those three PCs are from the city that fell really recently. So one of their uh, mid-range goals is going there and liberating it from the air archon. The other player has problems with the fire archon, so he's going to be dealing with that. Other than the local powers, they've also been discovering non-deific, non-god higher powers that come from long, long past, and have been sleeping inside the planet, let's say, without giving so much spoilers. They've been dealing with those, like discovering stuff that have been long lost, even even to the like coveted scholars of the Zierat, a magocracy, and have been discovering stuff about themselves, like how they're connected to the past and how they're actually, destined to shape the future. Let's say, being really cheesy. And they have been looking at the moon a lot. Like they really like the moons, let's say, plural there too.
Oh, okay. What do you do for a calendar in your campaign? Do you have like
I have my
just
own. Uh, it's a 10-month calendar with 360 days. So 336 days per month, approximately. Some have more, some have less. Uh, I, of course, as a nerd, charted this cycles of the moon on that calendar. So it does show which state which moon is going to be in specific dates. Of course, like I mentioned, the year is 952. So the timeline is based on that. The months are actually named after the gods, like the seven virtues and the three keepers, so 10 months. Of course, the
Mhm.
sinners don't get representation, which makes them angry more than they already are. Days, actually, I still use Sunday and Monday regular days. I didn't have the name. I didn't name the days because that would cause a lot of confusion than I already caused because they're still trying to, uh, even though it has been like 3 years we have been playing in the setting, they're still trying to get used to the months being different.
Yeah, you want to balance like immersion with a realistic ability to
Yes, yes. So
play the game.
yeah, so the days are 24 hours. The time zones are like relatively simple. The climate is usually represented on the map. Like the current place they're in is, like I said, the middle European-esque. The more northern they go, the more Nordic it becomes, to the point where after a while they pass the northern circle and go to the pole, which is completely iced, let's say. So geography is actually pretty simple too. I never thought about tectonics, like the continental plates or some stuff that's a little above me. So if the placement of my continents doesn't make sense, happens. I,
Well, I mean, you can always
yeah,
just
yeah.
say it's
It's
magic, and
yes.
then you
I
don't
can
have to
always
come
say
up
it's
with an
artificial.
explanation.
I can always say that it's man-made or artificial.
It helps with immersion for the players if you have an explanation for that. That's a real world explanation, because then they can have more of an expectation that's in line with their own experience.
Yeah, having set rules for your world is always easier, both you and your players. While setting the rules, it can be hard because you have to do extra research and you have to think about everything that has happened to that point and will happen after that point. But after you manage the rules of your world, it's actually becomes easier because your players will have set expectations depending on the rules. And when something unexpected happens, you can just refer to the rules and say, hey, according to these rules, this should have happened here. So that's what happens, kind of, having like more like guidelines actually, because sometimes you have to break those rules to tell your story.
Yeah, but it lets the players be more grounded and not feel like stuff is just happening
Yes,
and that
correct.
they don't have an influence on the story, because that like you lay out that they could do the same thing if they wanted to or something like that. I'm not quite sure how to phrase it. But yeah, it's important to have that understanding of what's possible. Yeah, anything else you want to talk about?
Actually, I think I'm like without getting into too much detail, because if I were to talk about some things, we will be here for another hour. Uh, yeah, without going into too much detail, no, actually. I think I mentioned the outlying details of my setting.
Okay. Um, do you have any advice you want to give to other DMs?
Uh, in in story writing, actually, I would say don't be afraid of taking inspiration from other works. Like the in the first episode, you talked about Tolkien. If you're taking inspiration from Tolkien, that's great. That's actually a really good set of work. Don't be afraid of taking inspiration from other things, because you're not a professional writer. You're doing this as a hobby. You can just take parts that you like from other stories and make your story a mishmash of uh, patchwork and other content. Just if you're afraid of being a copycat and copying from other people, don't don't worry about it. It's just you and a couple friends sitting around a table and pretending that you are a hero and rolling some plastic rocks. Yeah,
I think some people worry about sort of getting caught doing that. Um, and my experience is that uh, typically that won't happen unless you're copying something that is very recent in pop culture that your players would also be paying attention to.
yeah. And like,
So like
if you're afraid of your players discovering, change a couple names, switch a couple things around.
oh yeah, you always want to do a little bit of changing
Yeah,
just
of
so it
course,
fits like the theme for your campaign.
yeah, of course, and not to do, being an exact copycat.
Like if you did something that was a copy of like the Lord of the Rings, like the Ring of Power series that just came out, like that feels a little too recent and
Yeah, it's a little
like
risky.
yeah, some other people might be watching it, but you could do something that's a copy of like the Lord of the Rings, their trip through the mines of Moria, um, and that's not necessarily something that's in recent memory for
Yes.
people, so you're not going to get caught doing it,
Like,
even though it's still yeah, it's a good adventure that you can
I'm gonna
use.
put myself in front of the fire with this, but the inspiration I got from those four elemental archons was from Final Fantasy IV, to be specific.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because there are like elemental demons in that game. So when I was playing around in Final Fantasy IV, hey, this looks cool. I'm gonna take it. And that's how I came up with that elemental chaos storyline.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
Nothing wrong with taking from Final
yeah,
Fantasy. They have some very good plots.
yes. And my players didn't play Final Fantasy games, so I'm good on that end.
Well, all right. Thanks for coming on the show, Unaz. It was really nice having you here.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.